Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now today, something of a video in which I'm going to talk about some items which are personal to me. And the goal is that it gets you to think about some of those most valuable items that you own. But when I say valuable, I do not mean things which have material value. You'll understand what I mean as we go along, because invariably, as we progress on our life journey to the one inevitable destination of Chap Nirvana, which we're all heading towards, we pass through these seasons and we find ourselves accumulating things, possessions, which are deeply important to us. They resonate with us right to the core of our bodies. Now these things, they may have no financial or material value. They may be rare. They may be steeped in the memories of the years that we have lived as we get to this point in our lives. And they can be quite unassuming things, really. You know, that their value to us goes far beyond their material worth in the wider world. They are things that are essentially containers, receptacles of our memories and our emotions that we have encountered, and they have become imbued with the emotions and thoughts of those periods of our lives as we go along. Now, by and large, I'm not a particularly sentimental person about the items that I own. In fact, I'll go as far to say this. You know, if my house was on fire, people always say, if your house was on fire, what would you run back into the house to save? And people will say photograph albums and this and that and, you know, the handkerchief that my grandmother gave me. I don't think that I own anything that would propel me to run back into a burning building and risk my life to save it. Because in truth, I don't own anything which is worth risking my life for, and I would like to think that you feel the same. Your life is more valuable than any material possession. However, there are a few things which actually have no value at all. Some do, some don't, which I come across every so often as I go through my life journey, as I'm passing through my house, and I'll find something, you know, this item which triggers a memory, and it has the ability to stop me in my tracks as it rakes up the emotions of the years long gone by. So I'm going to share with you today some of the items, some have no value at all, which I have encountered in my life and I still keep around because they give me warm, fuzzy feelings, or they make me think quite deeply about parts of my life. And I want you at the end to let me know the items in the comment section which do the same for you. So the first item, which has the power to rake up those old memories, is this thing here. It is my old Royal Air Force beret, which lives in my bedside table. Haven't really done anything with it. I don't wear it obviously anymore, but this beret was, it immediately reminds me of my military service, because this was the last beret which I had whilst I was still serving. Probably had it for a couple of years. I would have gone through a few berets over the years. Obviously they get lost, they got damaged or whatever, they wear out. And this one was certainly the one I had for my last few years. I was serving in Belgium when I left military service, and this was the one I would have worn day to day, ordinary everyday hat wearing for work. And it's had a tough life. It's got a few moth holes in it now. The badge, bit cheap and tacky, bit out of date now because the new RAF badges will have the King's crown. This is the old Queen's crown. But for me, it's more than a hat. It is more than just something which you wore to cover your head when in service. For me, it symbolises something. It symbolises not only the 10 years of service, which I gave to my country, but it symbolises a transition for me as a human being. Because when I joined military service, I was 17. I was legally a child under the age of 18. And I transitioned from being a boy into a man over the 10 years. I spent years living in other countries. I spent years living with other amazing men and women who were striving towards the common purpose, which we had all taken a sacred oath when we joined. The oath of allegiance to our country. And that oath binds me and every other man and woman who took that oath at some point in their lives. Now, if you're sitting there watching this video and you have taken the oath of allegiance, as I did, as a child, you and I have something in common. We are family. We may have never met in our lives, but we share a bond which is unique, uncommon, and very special. And for me, that is what this hat symbolizes. It is that journey for me from childhood to adulthood, as my father did. My father enlisted in the military when he was 18 years of age, and I was a little bit before him at 17. And my family go right back to the Boer War, serving as professional servicemen in the army. In fact, I think I'm the only one who served in the Royal Air Force, so we'll gloss over that. But it is that kinship as well between me and every other person who has served, whether you served in the United Kingdom forces, the forces of the Commonwealth, or even our other allied friends who serve alongside us from time to time. And that is something which is, I think, still an incredibly noble thing to do. You choose to serve your country, you put service before self, and this hat, this beret, reminds me of that every time I see it. And that certainly is a memory which I will hold on to for my dying days. Okay, now my next valuable possession, not materially valuable, but valuable in the olfactory world, is this fellow here. This is Kuros by Yves Saint Laurent, and it is the first ever luxury fragrance which I purchased. I'm going to say probably 1990, and I remember it vividly because when I was a young fellow growing up in the coal mining valleys of South Wales where nobody really had any money, and you would go into the sort of dingy, sweaty nightclubs of the era, and I remember the air would be heavy with the fragrances of all of these folks who were wearing those powerhouses of that era. They would have been, you know, Dracar Noir, Coram, and all of that, you know, Escape by Calvin Klein. And the one which intoxicated me the most was Kuros by Yves Saint Laurent. And I remember it vividly. And I was never financially able to purchase this because I didn't have any money. I was a young guy. And then I joined the military and I was posted to Germany. And when you're in Germany, of course, you go to the NAFI and things are a bit cheaper. There are tax-free advantages to be in the military serving overseas. So I sort of shepherded up my money, and I think it was about 50 Deutschmarks, which was still an awful lot of money really for a young chap then. I bought Kuros, and to this day, when I smell it, it is like getting into a time machine and transporting me back to when I was 19, 20 years of age. I mean, I don't even like it so much today. It's quite a brash fragrance, quite urine oriented, but it has that ability to conjure for me my youth all over again. And I've never been without a bottle of this in my adult life. I might wear it once a year, and God knows how old this fellow is here. It's probably 10 years old. And it's only a little bottle, it's only a 50 milliliter one. But if this one, when it runs out, there's not much in there, I will definitely buy another one. As long as Kuros is manufactured, I will have a bottle in my collection because for me, it is where the scent journey began and it will be where it ends as well. Okay, my next one, valuable item, materially valuable, but also emotionally and valuable, but also a milestone event in my life. It is my Rolex Datejust 36mm. It is stainless steel, fluted bezel, Jubilee bracelet, bright blue dial. And this particular model I have, I was fortunate at the time, it actually has what they call the roulette date wheel, which means every other, so on odd days, the date digits are made out in red. So every so often, every other day, you get a day with the blue and the red look magnificent together. And today's the 19th, so they look rather splendid, contrasting against each other. Now, it's not for the material value this watch is important to me. It's important because it is the first ever luxury item, really, of any value that I bought in my life. In fact, I was 48 years of age, going back 8 years now. I'm 55, 7 years. And all my life, I'd had kind of ordinary jobs, right? I've worked in the military, I'd worked in law enforcement, and these jobs, whilst they are incredibly noble, adventurous, interesting, dangerous, they don't pay well. And I never had a surfeit of money which allowed me to invest in the items like lovely watches that I'd always wanted to. Always owned second-hand cars, always owned cheap watches. But I got to a point when I was 48, coming to the end of my career in the military, in the law enforcement, because my retirement kicked in at 50 with the pension program I was on. So I thought, if I don't buy one now, I am never going to buy one. And when I was young, growing up in the valleys of South Wales, no money, and at that time, in the 90s, people wore Rolex Datejusts as a sign of financial achievement, of success, of getting there in their lives. And regardless what they were, you might have been a successful bricklayer or an electrician or a businessman or whatever. The Rolex Datejust was that, signature watch that people would buy. And that is why when I was 48, I had a little bit of money, I had stability financially, and I thought to myself, Ash, it's now or it is never. I went to a jewellery store and I purchased the Datejust. And for me, this authorised dealer I bought it from the window, no wait list back then, and it struck me as a landmark moment in my life. And in fact, in two cases it was, because it was actually I can tell you when I bought it, it was the 15th of April 2018. It was my father's 88th birthday. He was with me at the time, and my son, who was 8, was also with me at the time, and we sat at the counter in the authorised dealer, me in the middle, my dad on my left, my son on my right. 3 generations of my family, father, son, grandson, and I bought for the first time a luxury item in my family's history. And I will, of course, pass it on to my son, and he will do what he will with it. But that is the reason for me why it was valuable, not because it has material value, but because it was us inching over the sort of finishing line in life and buying something that we could pass on and set off down the generations as we go forward. Now, the next item is of a literary kind, and it is a book. And is a book, as you can see, called An Unsung Hero, Tom Crean, Antarctic Explorer, written by a chap called Michael Smith. I read this book about 3-4 years ago. I've always been interested throughout my whole life in the Antarctic area, the polar area of the world. And, I, as a child, grew up on stories of Ernest Shackleton, Robert Falcon Scott, people like that who explored Antarctic regions. And I'd never really heard of Tom Crean. I knew he was on the crew, but I did not know about this man. An ordinary man of Irish stock, from a big family, no education, just a bloody hard grafting man who had courage, amazing levels of determination, physical strength, but more than anything, unshakable mental strength. And when I read this story, what Tom Crean did, and I'm not going to go into it now, I will recommend that if you're interested in reading about a genuine, living superhero, read this book about Tom Crean. To my mind, Tom Crean and his deeds in Antarctica as just a crew member, you never see his name at the top of any page. He's not ever spoken about in the same sentence as Ernest Shackleton, Robert Scott, Roald Amundsen and all the other crew. But Tom Crean, to me, is one of the most impressive men I have ever read about, heard about, and his story inspires me every day. I did a video on it, marking one of his many achievements in life. And I remind people of that every February when the anniversary of that comes around. But this book, to this day, propels me through my life. When I think, you know, if you're in a down point or having a crappy day, I think to myself, wow, what I'm going through right now is but a holiday compared to the challenges Tom Crean faced in Antarctica, and he overcame and he defeated them with strength of character and strength of mind. I wish I could go into his stories here. We don't have time. Suffice to say, this is one of the most valuable possessions in my life because it gives me inspiration, and that is something which is beyond fiscal value. And this book does it for me. All right, folks, don't worry, we're getting towards the end, and this next item has no monetary value at all, but it has enormous sentimental value for me. It is a shirt. It is quite simply a short-sleeved Ben Sherman shirt, and I can't even remember when I bought this. I can only tell you it's probably in the early 2000s, and I used to wear this shirt because I rather like the colour. It's got a pleasant sort of bluey teal colour with these red stripes on it, and I just tended to wear this as a casual shirt with a pair of chinos tucked in the summer months. And yeah, it was quite simply one of my favourites, and that was the reason why I wore this shirt on my first ever date with the woman who is my wife, Rachel, who has been alongside me now for 18 years. I think we're married for 18 years. We've known each other for over 20 years, I guess. And this shirt I decided to wear on the day that we first met. We'd corresponded, we'd encountered each other through the internet, right, through a dating site. That was a new thing back then, in its infancy, if you can imagine, 20 years ago. And it was a bit of a shot in the dark. I thought I'll give it a try. And I went to meet this woman in a town which neither of us were from, but it was between where we both lived. And I thought, I want to look my best, so I wore this shirt. It was before the days where I would routinely wear a collar and tie and a sports jacket. Of course, I was still in my early 30s then, right? And this is what I wore. And since then, I remembered it vividly wearing that shirt. And we met and we had a meal and, you know, life unfolded. We fell in love, we got married, we had a child, and, you know, our lives are very happy and settled right to this day. We've never had an argument, honestly. But this shirt, for me, is where it all began. And I consider it to be my lucky shirt. Now, actually, it's a little large for me these days because I lost a little bit of weight since back then. And I used to like my shirts quite loose even then. So it's not something I could wear these days. And I've considered to myself, you know, perhaps cutting it up and making it into a pocket square or something else, using the material so that a little part of that shirt will go through me, go through life with me, and it'll be that memory for me. But so far, I've decided to keep it as it is. It still holds enormous emotional attachment for me as the shirt which began the period of my life which I have come to call the happiest period of my life with my darling wife. So pure sentimentality, no value at all, but beyond value to me. Don't worry, folks, just 2 more items to go. And here is an item which I can actually put on to demonstrate it as we are discussing it. Now, this is a Tilly hat, right? And it's a Canadian-made Tilly hat. And I bought this hat probably about the year 2000. I was at the time very heavily interested in mountain trekking, adventure training, going out into the mountains. I lived in Wales, right on the cusp of the Brecon Beacons National Park. My sport and hobby of choice was to get up in the mountains trekking. And this was the hat I wore in the winter months. Sorry, in the summer months to avoid the sun, although you could wear any time of the year really. And of course it is a, I think they call it duck canvas. It's one of the original Tilly hats. I bought it from eBay. And I got a feeling I paid about £10 for it. I wouldn't have paid a lot. They're quite expensive hats these days. But this hat has been on a hell of a life journey. I wore it for years, trekking in the mountains. I have photographs of me wearing this hat all over the world. I have a picture of me wearing this hat with my wife before we got married when we were on a trip to New Zealand, and I wore this hat on the top of the Fox Glacier when we were trekking up there, you know, at the sort of right on the top of the glacier. You couldn't see a hand in front of your face. And I've also got pictures of me wearing this hat in the rainforests of northern Thailand, in the Chiang Mai area, when we were on a rainforest expedition. I remember that, I think it was 2005, 2006. Hell of a thing. I remember it vividly. You know, you were profoundly sweating, there were snakes everywhere, but this hat was always with me. It never let me down. When the monsoons came, it actually kept me, well, kept my head dry. And when, you know, in the sun, it stopped me from baking under it. So this hat, I've got a number of other Tilly hats now, actually. I've bought a few over the years, always from eBay, never paid full price. But the old Tilly hat is a hat which means enormous amounts to me because it reminds me of the adventurous life which I have led, and I still do. I will still drag the old hat out when I'm going out on maybe a day of walking in the woods or going out somewhere, and the next time I go on an adventurous trek somewhere, this will always be the hat that I reach for. My son has followed in my footsteps because he's into, you know, Duke of Edinburgh's training, 10 tours training. He's a scout, Boy Scout, and I got him a Tilly hat, and he never goes without his when he's out there in the various environments where he's on his adventures too. So for me, the Tilly hat is a cross-generational symbol of adventure in my family. Okay, now the final item is a little bit more profound, and you'll understand why I've saved this one to last. And it is, I was going to talk about medals, right? Because they are kind of a symbol of service, something that you've done. And I have my own medals here, and I was going to talk about these things which are, I guess, the culmination of a career, a life of service, and so on. But then I thought to myself, well, you know, whilst my medals have some meaning to me, and, you know, they are like a CV, if you will, for somebody who's into that sort of thing, I have some other medals which have much more profound interest to me. They are not of any value. These will have been given out in their millions to people at the end of the Second World War. And you know, excuse me whilst I just wrangle them from their box. Now, these are the service medals of my great uncle Herbert David, and he served in the Second World War, and the medals he has here are extremely common. They are the France and Germany Star, the Defence Medal, and I don't know what the other one is, I can't even recall. I think it's the sort of Home Defence Medal or something like that. And he was my mother's uncle, and I remember Uncle Bertie, as we called him. His name was Herbert, but he was Uncle Bertie to me. And he was a bus driver in the town as I grew up. They lived not terribly far from my mum and dad and me. And we used to go and visit Uncle Bertie, and he used to let me shoot his air gun in the garden. And his wife, Auntie Glenys, they never had any children. And, you know, they were just lovely members of the family that we would see at special occasions. And I didn't realise at the time that Bertie had served in the Second World War. But when Bertie died, as I say, he had no children, so his possessions were shared between the family, and I was given these medals because I was in military service myself at the time, and they felt that they would have some meaning to me. And rightly they did, because when I discovered more about Uncle Bertie, he had served, I believe, in the Royal Artillery during the Second World War, and he had landed on the beaches of France in the Allied liberation invasion of 1944. I don't know when, it would have been D-Day plus, or maybe even D-Day, I don't know, but he would have, you know, been in the Allied invasion of Europe of 1944. And he would have landed there with his brother, Isaac David. And whilst Bertie survived the war, his brother Isaac, known throughout the family as Ikey, lost his life. He was killed in France, and these medals always resonate with me. for two reasons. Obviously, Bertie, they had no meaning to him because these medals have never been mounted. They've never been worn. They are as they came to him in the box, which would have been sent to him. They've got his name on it, H. David, Herbert David, and this is how they were just issued to military servicemen after the war. But he never wore them. He never wore them to the annual remembrance parades. They were in the box as they were when they were issued to him in 1945, 1946, whenever he was demobbed. And I think the reason why many men from that generation chose not to wear the symbols of their service is because it represented for them those terrible memories of sacrifice. And for Uncle Bertie, of course, he lost his brother in France while he was there also fighting as well against the Germans. And his brother is buried in France. Whilst Bertie came back and survived and had the life perhaps which was denied to his brother. So for me, these medals resonate because yes, it was a member of my family who served in the war. It also symbolises a member of my family who died in the war, the brother of Uncle Bertie, who none of us, my mother knew him, but obviously she was young then. And it is a symbol of sacrifice, a symbol of the generation who went before us, who gave their all so that we can live the lives that we do today. So in consequence, my medals have little meaning, really. These medals are the medals which have meaning to me because they are genuine sacrifice. Sacrifice from my family, sacrifice of Uncle Bertie, of his service. Who knows what he had to do in France as part of the liberation. But these are a very prized possession of mine. And they also sit in my bedside table along with my RAF beret because they are symbols of sacrifice and service which I will never forget. And they have great meaning, even though in truth they have no material value at all. So there we go. I hope it's not too heavy for you today, but these are the items which have enormous value to me. Most of them have no value at all. It is but of sentimental consequence other than material cost. Let me know, I would love to know, what things are of value in your life? Be they financial value or just sentimentality such as mine. I'd love to hear about it. And there we go. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you did, let me know by liking the video and subscribing to hear more like this. And of course, ask me a question. Pose me a question, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you. And I make videos often in response to the suggestions which I get from my viewers. If you'd like to join me on this journey to Chap Nirvana, all you got to do is become a patron. Tiny monthly fee, and I make extra videos just for my patrons. So, until the next time we meet, folks, keep those valuable items close, and I will see you again very soon.